for you guys. We're going to be talking about parenting the non-traditional family. So just to give you like a little bit of background about myself, I graduated with my master's in counseling from Grace College in Indiana, and currently I work at Pennock Hospital and Thornapple Valley Church in town. You probably are familiar with both of those. I come from a divorced family, and so because of that I am pretty passionate about non-traditional families. And basically, I think every family, no matter if you're traditional or non-traditional, you have unique strengths that you can utilize. And so I hope that today, as we talk through some of these issues that come through non-traditional families, I hope that you guys feel encouraged if you are in an environment of a non-traditional family on how to do parenting well. So, you know, the first thing I thought about is what exactly is non-traditional, because when I think of family in general, even if you have the traditional like mother and father unit, I think almost every family is a little bit unique on its own. So, but for the sake of today, what we're going to consider non-traditional is single parent families, blended families, grandparents who are parenting, divorced families, foster parenting, and then the list could go on and what makes you know, a non-traditional family. But I think those are the big ones that we see today. I did have a video, but we can't really get the speakers to work. So, you know, when I thought of non-traditional, the first kind of thing that popped into my head was, I was thinking, well, what defines like a non-traditional family? And I'm sure everyone here has watched Star Wars before. I mean, I'm guessing. Just taking a wild guess. You know, when I think of non-traditional, I mean, I don't know how much more non-traditional you can get than you're fighting your dad and you find out he's your father. And so I really wanted to show the video, but for the sake of internet problems and a lot of difficulties we have today, at least we have a PowerPoint. So, but that's kind of one thing that I thought of as a non-traditional family, and something that really, you know, I think every family has its weird quirks. So I kind of wanted to just look at some of the big ticket items, I think, when we think of non-traditional families. Hopefully, you might not engage with all of them, but maybe there's a few that you could either see, you can connect with other people in your family who are in this situation, or maybe yourself. So I think there's some key problem areas that are defined with blended families, and I just kind of wanted to go over those briefly today, and then hopefully go through some solutions. So some possible problem areas with blended families would be acting as two separate units instead of agreeing together as a couple in the interests of all children. Huge, huge factor right there. And then discipline disagreements, putting the children above your spouse's relationship, and then negatively talking about the exes, which in every situation, this is like a huge, huge thing as parents that you have to be really careful of. So I wanted to talk more in depth about some solutions if you're in a blended family situation to some of the problems. And there's a million and one problems that could exist, but I think we're just going to try to hit the big picture items today since we have a limited amount of time. So if you are in a blended family situation, I think it's important that you come to an enthusiastic agreement as a couple. And it sounds kind of weird how that's stated, but it's all about agreeing as a couple in the best interest of children. I want to give you an example. I do some counseling, and I did some counseling before I even moved up here to Michigan, and I was seeing this family. They had this lady came to me for her issue with her son. He was acting out a lot, and he was the only child. And her husband got a divorce about three years ago, and she remarried. Well, she remarried to a guy who had a son the same age, 8 years old, as what her son was. And the big weird contrast is I was trying to figure out, okay, why is he acting out so much? And the weird ticket item that came up was the fact that the father was disciplining the his 8-year-old son, totally different than the mother was disciplining her 8-year-old son. The father didn't have, he was the kind of guy who was really laid back, really nonchalant, and so as soon as the kid made a huge mistake or was hitting somebody or whatever, he'd be like, go to your room, and then he's like, okay, I'm sorry, oh, okay, fine, come on out, you know, you can play or whatever. And then the mother was more of a disciplinarian. If she said she was going to do something, she did it, and she was very consistent. That caused a ton of strife between the kids, strife between the parents, and that's why I think coming to an enthusiastic agreement as a couple is huge. So how do you come to an enthusiastic agreement as a couple? This can be kind of difficult, and it takes practice. I think first of all, setting ground rules to make negotiations pleasant and safe are very important. So you need to respect each other's opinions, even if they differ from your own. Identify the problem from the perspective of both you and your spouse. If your spouse is more laid back, they may have to step up a little bit to be a little bit more strict, and then the person who's really strict needs to also step down a little bit to match where both people can feel like they're comfortable in the communication. So brainstorm solutions without judgment. Without judging your spouse for, wow, your idea is totally lame and stupid. Just listen, be a good listener, and then choose a solution that is appealing to both of you. Choose something that you both can buy into. And then if you and your spouse do not create a unity together as a blended family, it will have a lasting negative effect on both of your children. I think this is a huge thing, and you notice it when it's a divorce situation to begin with, that impact that it has on children. And if you do remarry and you have a blended family, it's really important that you show a unified front. Kids thrive on consistency and on things that they can guarantee will happen. And when you have parents who are working together, even if it's a stepdad or a stepmom, it's huge to make them feel comfortable. Some problem areas with single parenting that I wanted to just talk about. A lot of them are probably no duh to you guys as you think about it, but visitation and custody problems, the effects of continuing conflict between the parents, less opportunities for parents to spend time with their children, disruptions of extended family relationships, and problems caused by the parents dating and entering new relationships. And this is another one that's super huge. And it's tough being a single parent because you're trying to take on multiple roles, you're working probably tons of hours so that you can take care of the family financially. And so here's just some possible solutions to those single parenting problems. Absolutely never talk negatively about your ex in front of your children. I don't care if they are the worst person in the world. Make sure your child is safe, but do not talk negatively about your spouse. Whether they've said hateful things to you or cheated on you, whatever the situation is, you need to respect your child in that way, because the child will end up resenting you later, even if you were totally right about that person being a complete loser. You need to show respect for the child's father or mother. Get help and support for yourself, and do not use your children as a sounding board to vent your hurts from the divorce. This is super difficult because I get the fact that if you're going through a divorce situation, it is horrific for you. You've probably been hurt to the deepest level, and it's hard not to just the kids there and use them as a sounding board to talk and vent out your issues and your problems. But again, it's kind of like talking negatively about your ex. That causes a lot of stress for the child, unnecessary stress that they will have to go through. And really, this is the time when they need support as well as you. So I would encourage you to go talk to somebody, take care of yourself, get some support, some counseling, talk to somebody you really trust, and when you need to vent out, have some people there that are going to be a better option for you than your child. Get your child counseling and support to deal with the impacts on their life from the divorce. I think a lot of times kids feel a little bit lost when the divorce situation happens, and it's hard not to put the kid to the back burner when you're going through a lot of trauma yourself. So get some support for the child as well. There's a lot of great places, whether it's through the church or through Berry County, where you can get children's support for this divorce type situation. And then remain consistent in discipline and relationship. Do not treat your children differently post-divorce. I think this one is huge. And I think the biggest reason is you may stop disciplining them just because you're like, oh, well, I feel really bad, they're going through a super hard time, they're going to act out. But what you end up creating is no consistency for the child. And when you create no consistency for them, that makes them feel even more unsafe and unsteady. So remain consistent in discipline and remain consistent in a relationship with them, or if you haven't been consistent in those, step it up and don't treat your children differently post-divorce situation. And then seek out support and help. Being a single parent is really tough. I think it's really important that you utilize the resources around you to create a supporting environment for yourself. And this one, I don't know if there's anybody in this room that this would apply to, so I'm just going to touch briefly on it. It's pretty common now in our culture for grandparents to be parenting, and it's for a number of reasons. And I think I talked to a couple, it was a few months ago actually, and they were struggling with being grandparents who were parenting. They thought that the mother would step up eventually after she got on her feet, but it just kind of shifts over time and you end up stuck in that role as a parent when you were hoping just to help out for a little bit. So you obviously love the child, and you want the best interests for the child, but it's tough being a parent for that many years in a row. And so my encouragement is, if you want to be successful as a grandparent who's parenting, be committed to the role of a parent. And that's committed to being a disciplinarian. I mean, I think the coolest thing about being a grandparent is you always hope, you can bring the kids over, spoil them right, and you send them back home to mom and dad. But realistically, if you are going to take this parenting role in the best interests of the children and for your sanity, you need to be committed to the role of a parent. And then, if necessary, set solid boundaries between the child and the biological parent. This can be absolutely huge. In some situations, the parent may give the child lots of false hope, like, you're going to come and stay with me in a year, I'm going to let you come and stay with me this time, or I'm going to come visit you, and that can be super taxing on the child, and it's sometimes necessary that even if it's your own daughter or son, that you step up and say, hey, no more false promises. If you say something, you have to stick to it, and sometimes that's creating better boundaries between, and that's your coming up again with your role as a parent. You have to be a parent to this child, and sometimes let your grown-up child be with better boundaries, which is tough to do. Then find support for the child to work through the rejection by a parent or the pain of a loss of a parent for whatever reason their parent is unable to take care of them. It's really important that you find support, counseling, great friends, mentors, whatever that would look like. And then a huge one is taking care of yourself. This can be, again, you're being put back into the role of a parent when you're probably not hoping to be in that role anymore. I think it's huge that you take care of yourself and get yourself some rest, some support, whatever necessary, so you can maintain your role. And then just touching on foster parenting, I don't know if there's any foster parents in the room or somebody looking to be a foster parent. Here's just a couple of things on that. Know your home and your family well. I think you have to have your priorities straight, and that's your spouse, your children, whoever is in the home. Make sure they're all on board with this, because if everyone in the family isn't on board with the foster parenting, it can be a really tough environment. And you have to learn to communicate effectively. You're going to be communicating with social workers. I mean, if you've been a foster parent or looked into it, you know that there's no end to the communication that you're going to be involved in. And then successfully manage behaviors of challenging children. And this can be really tough, especially when you don't have any authority in that child's life and they are not probably happy campers, and rightfully so. So you're going to really have to have that patience and that perseverance to work at managing the behaviors. And then managing the child's losses as well as your own. Sometimes kids enter the foster parenting environment and they are going through horrific situations, or they have gone through them, and that can bring up a lot in yourself, maybe that you've gone through before. And so making sure that you get support not only for the child but for whatever you may need to work through as things come up is really huge. And then learning to work well with others. You kind of have to be a natural at this one, or get really good at it if you want to be a foster parent. I did have a video I was going to play again, but the video thing is not working out, so I have something better than a video, actually. I have asked my friend Julia, you can come on up. I've asked my friend Julia to come and chat with us here today. And Julia, how old are you?
I'm 12.
Sorry, I gotta. Okay. We'll just take that one. Never mind. Okay. So I brought Julia up here. I thought it'd be really fun to actually let you guys hear from a kid. I think the most important thing when you're in any type of parenting, whether it's traditional or non-traditional, you really have to be engaged with knowing your child well. And so I asked Julia, because she's just so well-spoken and an awesome, beautiful face. So I thought it'd be really fun to hear from her and ask her some questions about what's made a difference in her relationships with her parents. So I was wondering if you can let me know, just from taking your relationship with your mom, what has really stood out in your mind about your relationship with her?
Well, usually just when she spends time with me, and she just takes time out of her day, and it just really speaks to me because that's telling me that she actually wants to spend time with me, and I'm the #1 priority.
That's awesome. And what about from your dad? What stands out in your mind from him?
Well, usually he's always gone at work all day, and me and my 3 sisters take turns doing date nights. And usually it's just when he just takes us out special for a movie or a dinner, and it just makes me feel really special because he's taking time out of his night to spend time with me.
Right.
Or it could just be something that we've been talking about that we've really wanted to do, and it's just really special when he just takes in and does that for us.
So it sounds like what I'm getting from what you're saying is that it's a lot of quality time. Like they're putting an effort to get to know you and give you undivided attention and time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you want from a parent if you're having a bad day? I'm guessing you probably never have a bad day or anything like that, but just for instance, if you do, what do you hope from a parent at that point?
Well, usually when I have bad days, I just feel like no one loves me, and I just feel so alone. And usually when just someone, my parent or my mom or my dad, just comes up to me and just makes me feel like I'm loved, it makes me feel like they really want to help me and change my attitude.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think something that would be really helpful for everyone in here is, I'm sure you never do anything wrong. Absolutely. But, you just have that great face, you don't do anything wrong. But for instance, when we all make mistakes, and when we make a mistake, and especially for you, what is it that you get from your parents? I'm sure you get a consequence, because that's just realistic. But what is it on top of that makes you want to change and become a better person? Like remember to take out the trash next time, or whatever it might be.
Well, mostly just forgiving, just making them feel really, or making me feel like they're being really forgiving, and just giving grace sometimes. Like, I feel like it's really special when I do something wrong and then they just give me grace and just put me off the hook, and I'm like, what? So it just makes me feel like they want to help me, and just makes me feel like I'm growing from the situation.
Yeah. So they kind of probably have to weigh it out depending on what's going to help you best.
Mm-hmm.
So they've gotten to know you and
Yes.
what works.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So, maybe there's people in the room who don't have a fantastic relationship with their child and they want to get better at it. From your perspective, if you didn't have a great relationship with your parents and they wanted to build something with you, what do you think they could do that would make it better?
Well, usually probably just letting them know that you are there for them, and just being there and just letting them feel loved. And it's probably not going to be the first time. Like, if someone just wanted to be like a clique with me, I'd just be like, okay. So it takes more times and tries. So like the third or second time is like, oh, you actually want to get to know me, and you want to know what's happening in my life and going on.
Yeah. So what you're trying to say is just like, sometimes if you've been really disappointed by someone in your life, and I'm sure you guys have all been disappointed by somebody, the first time they come to you and give you this attention and actually do things right, you're kind of like, yeah, maybe, but not totally sure I'm into this. So being persistent and consistent
Yes.
as a parent, consistent to try to get to know the child no matter what reaction they give you. Yeah. Ooh, the last me during. Okay, cool. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Definitely.
So, I think she gave us a great segue into this next piece that we're going to talk about. And that's really the focus is going to shift from what just works. It doesn't matter what, if you are non-traditional parents or if you're traditional, what are some key things in a relationship with children that will absolutely work. And to start out that, I wanted to talk about this. Different does not mean less influential. I think sometimes I hate just even saying non-traditional because it has this context of that you're not going to make it and that you're doomed to fail because you're a single parent or because you have a blended family now. And I think it's realistic there may be more challenges, but it doesn't mean that you can't have an amazing influential relationship with a child. And I just want you guys to all think for a minute back to your childhood and think through, I'm guessing with this big of a crowd there has to be some that came from non-traditional families, and thinking through who really made an impact on your life. It might have been a parent, it might be a mom or a dad, it might be a grandparent, it might be an aunt or uncle. It might even be just somebody, a friend, that had a big impact on your life. So there's certain things that just work in relationships all around. So I wanted to talk, this next phase is really just about parenting and the things that just work no matter if you're a foster parent, a grandparent parenting, or whatever. These are some tried and true things that will make your life a little bit easier parenting. So the first few things I want to talk about was what not to do. The top one I have is it's called helicopter parents. I don't even know if you guys can read that back there, but and does anybody off the top of your head know what this term means?
Hover, hover, hover.
Yes, exactly.
Are you one?
Wait for me.
I won't ask which one you guys all fall into, but so the helicopter parent, just to give you guys a brief example, it's when parents think that love means revolving their lives around their children, they hover over and rescue their children whenever any type of trouble arises. So this would be the parent that's always pulling their child out of a jam. Whether the child brought themselves into the jam or not, they're always the one, oh, they forgot their homework, running to the school and really pulling their kid out of every possible situation that could be a growing opportunity for them. And the weird part about this is most of the time when you look at a helicopter parent, you're like, they are amazing. They have got things going on, they're a great parent, they're so engaged in their child's life. And so, but the real factor here is that they feel uncomfortable imposing any consequences on their children. And the problem with that is that the real world doesn't quite work that way. There's a point when you grow up and the hovering stops because your boss doesn't quite hover like your mom did. And it becomes actually a big problem for the child to develop into the person that they need to be to live in the real world, which as a parent, that's what you should be trying to do. So that's kind of where the helicopter parent fails, is bringing their children into a place where they can handle the real world. And the next one is the drill sergeant parents. I won't even ask someone to describe it because the word describes itself. And this is kind of the family I grew up in, was more of the drill sergeant parent phase. And this was, these kids will be disciplined. They'll know how to act right. Their words are often put downs and I told you so's, which just that in and of itself can be hugely damaging long term for a child. You want to build them up and get them to think on their own 2 feet. And both the drill sergeant and the helicopter parent basically defeat you being able to think on your own. So here's this one thing I want to tell you guys. So the helicopter parent sends a message saying, you are fragile and you can't make it without me. And then the drill sergeant parent says, you can't think for yourself, so I'll do it for you. And with both of these, in the end, I think there ends up being resentment for a couple of different reasons. And you don't want that in your relationship with your children, especially when they become adults. And then the last one of the what not to do, and I'm sure there's more to this list, but these are the big ones, is the laissez-faire parent. And this is the parent that's so laid back that just raise yourself, children, just figure it out, you know. Which can be a major problem, especially when they're really small. And when you're thinking about your role as a parent, I think the big thing that you have to keep in mind is that you grow with your children. A baby needs a whole lot of attention, a whole lot of telling what to do and doing things for them. And then as they get a little bit older, you want to get them to start thinking on their own so that hopefully when they're a teenager, you can trust them to make some choices on their own. So the one parenting style that I kind of wanted to sit on is what's called the consultant parent. And this is hopefully the what to do. And you know, before we go into talking about the consultant parent, I just wanted to stop on the paradox of success and failure in raising your children. I think that no matter what, there's no tried and true guarantee, as there really isn't in life anywhere, that your kids are going to turn out perfectly and make all the right choices. You could be the best parent in the world, and in the end, the child still chooses. So I think as a parent, it's wise to put into perspective that you're going to do your best as a parent, and then leave the rest to, if you believe in God, to work in the child. And really don't weigh it on the successes and failures. Because if your child makes a mistake, they make a mistake. That's not always a direct perspective on you as a parent. So going into the consultant parent. The consultant parent is the one that moves from helping children to be from concrete thinkers as a younger child to abstract thinkers as a teenager. And basically children need thoughtful guidance and firm enforceable limits. So you normally set those limits when they're younger because don't touch the stove, it's hot. I mean, you're going to set a limit there to keep the child safe. Because of those limits that you set up, as children grow up, there needs to be more of an abstract thinking, like where the child can comprehend, oh, I don't touch the stove because it's hot, where you don't have to explain it to them every time. They begin to think on their own. And I think this is where the helicopter parent and the drill sergeant parent kind of fail, is that they're not challenging their kids to be abstract thinkers as they get older. So because of the different change in cognition as a teenager, parents need to adjust the way that they meet the needs of their children. So when children are adolescents, you tend to step back a little bit from the enforcer to more of a counselor and advisor instead of the police officer role. I think this is the big thing that this is where you're treating your children closer to where they're going to be like in the real world. It doesn't mean that you don't have limits and consequences. It means that you're really challenging them to think on their own 2 feet. And underneath there, I put learning at affordable prices. This one's really huge to me because I think kids end up suffering a lot from inflation, and that is that what they could have learned when they were 4 or 5, they have to learn when they're 17, when it costs a whole lot more. You know, a 4 or 5-year-old sees a piece of candy as they're in the checkout aisle and maybe grabs it. When a child doesn't learn at that affordable price where you teach them the right and wrong there, they steal a car at 17, it's a little bit more costly for them. And I think it's really important that as you're thinking like a parent, that you think to teach your kids where they can affordably learn. Not the whole just putting the candy back and then you just run out the store, and no, taking that time to develop in your child thinking so that as they get older, they're going to be better thinkers and they've learned at an affordable time in their life. And that one you could probably go on and on about, but I want to keep moving on. But I think that's a really huge one to keep in mind. So building positive self-esteem. basically, responsible children feel good about themselves. So you may have two radically different outcomes of children. Children with a poor self-concept often forget to do homework, they'll bully other kids, argue with teachers and parents, steal, and draw into themselves whenever things get rocky. But a child with a good self-concept about themselves generally has a lot of friends, they do their chores regularly, and don't get into trouble at school. That's just been proven, time and time again. And I think where you fit into this role as a parent is that your child, and this one took me a while, so you'll have to think through this one a couple of times. I am what I think you think I am. And this one is just so important that as I'm looking, assuming that she's my mom, I'm defining who I am by what I think she thinks about me. And that is so huge when you think about that as a parent, because if you're constantly focused on your child's weaknesses, then your child is going to perceive themselves as having tons of weaknesses. And I think, the reason why we focus on weaknesses is because the strengths are okay. So it's like, when the child does the right thing throughout the day maybe 20 times and then screws up one time, it's so easy to notice that one because you don't like that one. And then you don't notice any of the good things. And so this is where, yes, of course, you need to take care of the negative, but that you are being positive and developing their strengths constantly. The irony about children is that they will get attention from anywhere. You're constantly looking at teenagers who get negative attention, have these absolutely horrible friends, and you're like, why do you even hang out with them? It's attention. And they'll get even, whether it's negative or positive, and as a parent, it's so important that you're giving them positive attention so that they're going to want to get positive attention throughout the rest of their life and not negative attention, because that's how they'll view getting attention for the rest of their life. I think that's a little weird to conceptualize, but I think as you think of even yourselves being a teenager and even as an adult, how you perceive getting attention from people, it's really important as a parent that you're building into your children their strengths instead of their weaknesses. And so I wanted to look just at a couple of things that build a positive self-concept. So the first leg, for instance, of what's going to build your solid self-concept is the idea of that I am loved, unconditionally loved. And as a parent, that's the best kind of love any of us can get, is that kind of love that we know we're going to have despite what we do, despite where we fail in life, that we will be loved. And I think this is the top-notch thing as a parent that's going to build that solid table of self-esteem for your child, is making sure that they know they're loved unconditionally. This is a really common one, is that parents will often withhold their love to get a child to behave. And that's absolutely something that you don't want to instill in them, because for the rest of their life they're going to be focused on, I have to be perfect in order to be worth something. The next one is, I have the skills I need to make it. You want to instill in your child that they have the skills they need in life to make it, to be successful, to do what they are called to do. They have those skills. And kids are born with a great capacity to learn and do things the way big people do. And I was listening to this one story, and it was about this child. It was like a 5-year-old boy, and he said his dad was in the garage cleaning up some stuff, and he went out to the garage and he got a broom, and he could barely really move the broom around. And he started trying to sweep the floor. So he was sweeping the floor, and so he wanted to feel big and important for his dad to notice how awesome he was and how much he's growing and maturing. And his dad did notice. He noticed all the clumps that he was leaving all over the floor. Instead of noticing the awesome thing that the child was trying to do, he noticed the negatives. And you want your kids, again, to feel like they have the skills they need to make it. Don't worry about the piles of dirt in different places. Encourage your child, teach them, and support them when they're trying to grow up. The other one is I am capable of taking control of my life. This one is, again, kind of like what I just talked about with the last one. Instilling in your child that they are capable of making good decisions, even from the youngest age. Help them to make decisions, whether it's about what shoe would be appropriate for the day. If it's rainy, should they wear their rain boots? You know, give them choices, get them to start thinking, help them to feel like they can take control of life, that they can that they are capable of making good decisions. And then positive self-esteem comes from accomplishment. Kids get the most out of what they accomplish for themselves. And children will get more out of making their own decisions than having someone make those decisions for them. So what this might look like is that a kid will take a risk and try to do something they think that they might not be capable of, such as getting a broom and trying to sweep the floor. And then they will struggle in the process of trying to do it. And you'll see this maybe with a kid tying their shoe from the earliest age, and then you might see it in a teenager with something else, maybe a school project. After a time, they accomplish what they first set out to do. And then they get the opportunity to reflect back on their accomplishment and can say, look at what I did. And that's what you want to instill in your children when they're making these positive choices, even from the youngest age, when it comes to just like sweeping the floor, that you are instilling it in them, that pride in doing something great. The last one to building positive self-esteem is the idea of, if we're happy, they're happy. Children are constantly emulating what they see, and you know that because if we say the wrong word or whatever, the kids running around saying it, they catch up on all of the negative things that you do. And they think it's cool. They think you're the greatest thing that ever happened on this planet, especially when they're younger. So if we are happy, they will be happy. So you emulate what you want to have from your child. If you're constantly yelling and cranky and woke up on the wrong side of the bed, then you're going to have to expect that reaction from your child. They're trying to be like you. You are what you're teaching them to be. So keeping that in mind is important. And then we're almost through, so keep bearing with me. I know it's a lot of information in a small amount of time, but set limits. This is a tough thing to do, especially if you're more of that passive person who's more laid back and relaxed. You may have to help yourself out a little bit more with this one. Build walls that won't crumble. And when I'm talking about this, it's creating an environment of setting limits. Build these walls that you're not going to change your mind on them tomorrow and then put them back up the next day and then tear them down the next day, where it's like, it's okay to hit your brother today, but tomorrow when I'm ticked off, it's not okay. That's going to build a very unsteady foundation for your children. Especially in those younger informative ages, it's really important that you are consistent, and you're consistent in building these walls of limitations in your household that aren't going to be crumbling based on your mood. And then change from fighting words to thinking words. Fighting words, for example, would be, don't you talk to me in that tone of voice. And then a thinking word would be, you sound upset. I'll be glad to listen to you when your voice is as soft as mine. When I first read this, I was kind of like, and I don't have any kids, so, it's even weird that I'm up here doing this. But when I was thinking about this, I was thinking I'd be more the parent being like, don't you talk to me in that tone of voice. That just seemed a lot more me. And as I read this, I'm like, I don't really like this. I don't like this at all. But as I started to read and research it and think it through, it's so weird how you're giving your child, even in this thinking words mentality, a choice to do the right thing. And you being calm, you're teaching them to be calm and be appropriate with other people that might be yelling at them in the future. And when you look at that big picture of just changing your fighting words to thinking words, it's huge how much you're teaching your child just in that one instance. Another one would be, a child is dawdling with their homework. You get to work on your studying. Or the thinking words would be, feel free to join us for some television when your studying is done. It's really changing the mentality and getting that child to think, oh, there is a good reason why I should get this done so that I can watch whatever show I want to watch today. And then 2 kids are fighting. Be nice to each other, quit fighting. Again, the drill sergeant type mentality. And then the thinking words are, you guys are welcome to come back as soon as you work that out. You know, where you're really just getting the child to think. The next one is abolish the threat cycle. Threats don't work, especially if you threaten and nothing ever happens from it, which is the more common thing. Like counting to a bunch of numbers over and over and over again. You're going to count to 3, and then it's going to go to 5, and then it's going to go to 10. It really defeats your purpose. It's leading your child on to say, I can test the limits here. And you know, even as an adult, we do this. We do this at our workplaces, you know, because we do this anywhere we can. We're just human. We do that. And so when you know there's a possibility of getting away with something, or that if you push the limits, someone will give in to you, we generally do that. And that's the same thing with children. You want to teach them that that's not what life is about. And so the threat cycle, totally get rid of that. If you're going to make a threat, be able to follow through with it and do that. And then mean what you say and say what you mean. This kind of goes back to the fighting and thinking words and also the threats. Kids are going to perceive things maybe differently from how you're saying them. I've heard parents that have said, you know, I hate you to their kids before just because they're so frustrated. You know, you really have to get a hold on your emotions. Don't let things escalate to that point. And mean what you say. If you're going to say, if you don't get this done in 10 minutes, you're going to go to your room, then follow through with that. And this is kind of something that you could write down and put into every area of parenting because it's just so important. And then, I think this is about the final thing I had. Empathy with consequences. Good parents don't give warnings. They don't have to give warnings because they've set those, like what we talked before, those walls that won't crumble, so far in advance that they don't have to give a warning because it's already clear the expectation of the household. Rules and limits are a beautiful thing, especially in those younger years, because they make it safe. They make it safe for your other children, they make it safe for neighbors, whatever it might look like. Rules and limitations are safety for us. I'm sure you guys all have a job, and even some of the rules at your job might be obnoxious when you first think about it, but then you see or hear a story of how it went wrong to create that rule, and then you get it. And that's the same thing I think with kids. They may not understand right away why that rule was created or where it comes from, but you need to have those so you don't even have to give a warning. Allow for naturally occurring consequences. I think those are probably the best type of consequences because they're the ones that just fall naturally. I had an example for this and I can't remember it, but anyway, those are the kind of consequences as an adult that you think of, like you're speeding and you get pulled over. That's just a naturally occurring consequence.
I might have missed some of this. You're doing that for all age groups, don't give warnings?
Oh, did you miss that part?
Yeah, my baby was screaming.
Oh,
I had to go help real quick.
I put where good parents don't give warnings. What we had talked about with that was the example of if you've already set up those walls that aren't going to crumble and set up those positive limitations, children are already clear on the expectation. You've already made the expectation so clear over time that giving a warning is not necessary. Go ahead.
What about like a reminder instead of a warning? Like, remember the rule? Or would that still not?
And well, I think, you know,
I'm just
like
thinking
Julia
if
had said, there's points where, as a parent, you know when to give grace. I think what we're talking about here is when it's been, especially in those informative years, when you really need to, for their own safety, make sure that you follow through on consequences. I think you later on you play out in your head what's appropriate, and just knowing when to give grace or when to give, you know, a reminder. And it depends on the situation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
if they're playing with a BB gun and you don't play with a BB gun inside the house, probably don't need to give a warning. It's just, yeah, I already knew I wasn't supposed to do that. And I think when you create a pattern of constantly giving warnings to children, there's no concrete structure at all. And no direct limitations, and that's going to teach the kid that in life, you're always going to get a warning. When you get pulled over, you're always going to get a warning, And so that's when I'm talking about that. You have to feel it out based on the situation and the kid. Okay, so when there is no naturally occurring consequence that fits the mold for you guys, and a naturally occurring consequence actually might be if you've told your kid a million times over not to touch the stove and they do and they burn their fingers, which probably every kid has done. That's a naturally occurring consequence. You probably don't have to do anything more. They're probably going to learn a lesson from that one. But there's also times when you need to impose consequences on children. And that, is when there's naturally not one that occurs. So when you do have to impose consequences, I'm not going to go into what the consequences should look like. I'm sure you guys have all talked about that a million times. But make it enforceable. Make it fit the crime that actually happened, and make it firm in love. Don't ever give a consequence out of anger. You shouldn't have to go there. If you have given a consequence out of anger, it's probably because you've given so many warnings, you're just frustrated out of your mind. And that's another reason why not to give warnings. But making it fit the crime, you can be creative as a parent. I mean, sometimes they need to write out, and get them thinking, write out why that was wrong. Be creative as a parent on what is going to work for your child, and sometimes it has to be different. One child, you might just say, that really hurt my feelings, and that crushes them, But another child does nothing for them. So you have to really, back to when I talked to Julia, get to know your child, get to know what works, and then impose the consequences based on those things. And then always choose empathy over anger. We're all learning, even as adults we're learning. When we're at our job, what makes us become a better person when somebody comes to us and said, yep, that was wrong, but comes to us in a loving way and gives us that feeling that we can do this next time. We can deal with our sibling or deal with somebody at school and make the right choice and not hit him in the face. You kind of have to continue to put and instill in your child that hope that they can make it, that they are it. And empathy is one of those things that really does that. And it's super important. And then finally, it is never too late to be a great parent. The three things I would encourage you is if, maybe you're doing stuff the way your parents did it and it's not quite working out, because we tend to do that. Begin right away. Find a way to be accountable. Whether that's to a spouse, if you guys can make that work, whether that's to a best friend, whether that's to someone you really respect. Find a way to be accountable as a parent. Talk about your weaknesses and brainstorm a plan to work on those and make them strengths in your life. And then practice, practice, practice. I'm a big person that's into role playing. I think it's really important, and because I grew up playing piano, and I knew that if I didn't practice that song, I would fail at the next piano lesson. And that's the same way with parenting and everything in life. Even your relationship with your spouse, it's the same with that. If you do what you've always done, you'll be what you've always been. And that's a quote that I've always thought about. And so it's really important that you rehearse, that you practice. Sometimes you even have to memorize if that works for you, so that you can work through those weaknesses that you might have, that we all have. So here's kind of a 5-point guideline. I don't have it on the PowerPoint. Of things that you could do mentally to rehearse, to make you think through, problem areas you have as a parent. So pick the situation and what you want the child to do, or probably don't want the child to do, but in your head you pick the situation. Picture yourself standing tall, looking directly into your child's eyes and having a perfect right to expect what you're about to request as far as what you want them to do in a good way. Even if you need to stand in front of a mirror, imagine the sound of your voice. What kind of tone do you want to present? What kind of air do you want to represent about yourself? you know those people who are really amped up and loud and angry, they don't really present a confident, strong front. And you want to present that as a parent. Try it out on your friends and get their opinions if you have to. Rehearse this until you hear yourself saying what you would hope you'd say to your child. Sometimes I often think it's even important when you've messed it up. And I'll give you one example. This is not in a parenting way because I'm not a parent, so I don't have it. But my husband's like right there. That's Zach. Anyway, we never argue, but I'm just kidding. The times that we have, sometimes, a couple of times what's really worked for us, and this is something that is humbling, but humble people always are exalted. And you always are impressed by people who show an air of humility. And that's the same with your children. Humility and strength goes so closely together. Anyway, for instance, Zach and I have had issues with communication, as I'm sure just about every marriage does. And we've had to go back and say, okay, what just happened? Because we just went on this half-hour argument, and I'm not even sure what we're arguing about anymore. And so we went back to what triggered. Like, what triggered my response to be angry at you? What triggered your response to be angry at me? Where did we go mentally with this? And I think that's important to do with your kid, too. Say, okay, whoa, I'm yelling at you, you're yelling at me, what's going on? Backtrack and say, okay, what triggered you? Did I put you down in some way with the words I said? Get to know your child's heart, because at the core of every angry type response from you or a child, it's that we're hurt from something. Doesn't make our angry response right, but we're hurt. Figure it out, and then redo it. Say, okay, let's try this over again. I was upset that you didn't take out the trash, so I'm going to start this over again and say, hey, I really need you to you need to do this. You know, and you can still be a parent. You're still a parent, but find a way to do it in a way that doesn't demean, put your child down. Anyway, so that is what I have for you. I also included a couple resources. One book I think is really good. I did bring it with you so you could just see what it looks like. And that's called Parenting with Love and Logic. Some of the things I talked about today were actually from this book. It's really, really good. And then the next one is called Boundaries with Kids. Really done with lists of books, but I didn't want to overwhelm you guys. But if you do feel the need to look into a couple things that could help you out, I think those are two books that are easy to read and really good. So, and then do you guys have any questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a little comment.
Sure.
I find being a consultant a little more interesting this time around than it was the first time around. For example, you go, we like to watch Wheel of Fortune. The kids like to watch it with us. It's long about 7:15. Here's that commercial go on. Matt, 8 years old, after the commercial, looks at me and says, Grandpa, what's your next on function? Well, Matt, guess your penis won't do what you wanted to do. Okay, accept that with his 8-year-old view of the world. Someday he'll find out what I really meant. And he'll say, boy, Grandpa told me the truth.
Yeah, that's true. Don't, but if you, I didn't know, I came in kind of late. No, I didn't.
Oh, was it?
But if you guys do want any of the information, you know, I can always send you the PowerPoint notes if you want to.
Do we email you for that?
Yeah, you can. My email is Erica, E-R-I-C-A,
ERICA
at
@
TVC
TVC
web, W-E-B, .com.
web.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good, Erica. Very good. You talked about different ways of disciplining a child. Our son is diagnosed with high-functioning autism, ADHD, and the list just kind of goes on. And he has a need to have everything, to go by schedule, and to have everything in its place, and everything has a home, and blah, blah, blah. Well, he also has, he gets angry, and he likes to slam doors, and he gets angry, and he'll raise his voice, and we're constantly going through, you may not use that tone, you may not. Well, slamming doors is something we're working on. And so, and he's not allowed to slam doors. Now, it's high-functioning autism, so he looks like any other normal kid. He's not disabled or anything.
He has Asperger's.
No, does not have Asperger's. He has high-functioning autism. And that's his diagnosis. U of M did this, we're all there. Well, he had been warned, he had been told several times. Now, we do this more with him than we do, like you would say, another child. So we said, Logan, you may not slam the door. Tell me why you may not slam the door. I may not slam the door because I could break the door, because it's not polite, because. And he tells me 3 reasons why he cannot slam the door. Okay. So one day he had a friend over. Logan, you will not get another warning. The next time you slam the door, you will lose your door. The reason you will lose your door is why? Because one time I broke the door casing around the door. Yes, you did. So, do you own the door? No, I don't own the door. Who owns the door? You and Daddy own the door. What will happen if you slam the door? I lose my door. Yes, you do. Am I going to tell you anymore? No, you're not going to tell me anymore. Had a friend over thinking, I got a friend over, you're not going to do anything about it. He got mad. Wham! Shook the walls, shook everything. I looked at little friend, honey, you keep playing the Wii. You earned your Wii time. You get so many more minutes. Larry, get the hammer and the screwdriver now. And I go into Logan's room. Buddy, back up. No, you're torturing me. The door is no longer there. And he has to respect the door to earn the door. And therefore, he's not beaten, he's not dying, he's not dead. But he has to learn to respect the door. Now, when I walk in there, he's saying, you're torturing me. However, it's a way to learn. We open and we close doors. We do not slam them.
And I think that's a perfect example of making the punishment fitting the crime well, because you have to be creative as a parent. That's pretty creative.
However, I still torture him, ask him.
And the last one, they are talking about something. My son, I do the right stuff when I've got him, but I don't always got him now. And my husband, my ex has got him sometimes. He does completely the wrong stuff. And when he comes back, he's got a really hard time because he's trying to adjust.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm giving him warnings because the first few days when he comes back, he's used to totally different sets of rules on the rules that he's given there. What kind of warnings do you think? He's 4. So there are some things like running in the house. I'm not always going to tell him to run in the house. He knows by this age if he runs in the house, he's going to fall down and get hurt. So I don't do that. But I do warn him about some things.
Maybe it's something, and that's a tough situation. I don't know if you guys heard, but she's in a situation where her son goes and stays with Dad for a while, and Dad has total different set of rules than what she does. And so how do you get the child to work back with your rules? I don't know if this would work, but it's something to think about. Maybe putting up a chart somewhere.
He can't read, he's 4.
I know, but you could do symbols. You can do something that they could work with,
I
like
think-
showing running or whatever, and then go over it when they come home. Okay, now remember, here's different, and you have those symbols that the child can connect with, whether it's running or, different things. Now, what does that mean? That means I can't run. Kids
Like
connect
what
pretty
you said
quickly.
before, like I ask him, why are you not supposed to be doing what you're doing? And he'll tell me what, but I don't know. Do you have any idea for the first few days of transition time is really hard for him. I don't want to be too rough on him and be a drill sergeant, but I don't want to be too easy on him so he thinks he can get away with whatever the first few days he comes back from his dad. So do you have like a tip or two for something in the in-between time to just,
When
I
he
don't know,
first comes
any
back to
kind
your
of
house?
tip? Yeah, for the first 24 to 48 hours, he has a hard time. I mean, it's really bad if there's, I've called CPS a couple of times, so when he comes back, depending on how bad it was with his dad, the first time I make him stick to a consequence, he gets physical with me. And he's in counseling, we're working with it and stuff, but I don't know, if you're a counselor, do you have an idea?
I don't know if you understood what I was trying to say, but I would put like some type of chart there near where you're gonna see it all the time. But when he comes back, you know, in a very loving, empathetic way, say, hey, just wanted to remind you of what it's
Okay,
like
I know.
here. See our chart, have symbols that he can connect with, because kids are really good visually with that kind of thing. You know that because there'll be like shows on TV that have symbols and like kids running around and
So
singing
that
songs.
he can remember these are the rules.
Yeah, so they're always there, they're in front of his face, and then go over it together and make it fun. Find a way to make it fun. You could be creative with it, you could make a song out of it, a way to remind, and then you can always go back to that chart when they do something wrong and say, hey, remember you ran in the house, remember what happens when you run in the house, you have to go sit down or whatever, you know, would be a realistic, you know, consequence for you. But, and continue with the counseling. I know it's a tough situation that you're in, but that could be something that might be helpful.
No, she.
We're foster parents, and we foster little ones. We have one rule, and that's the easiest thing to do. If you can't do it at Walmart, you can't do it at our house. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's the easiest thing for them to remember. If you can't do it at Walmart, you can't do it at the house. If you can't bite at Walmart, you can't bite here. If you can't kick at Walmart, you can't do it here. If you can't scream, yell, blah, 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 and the list goes on. Can you do that at Walmart? No. Why not? But if you can't do it at Walmart, you can't do it here. And that's the only rule. And we had one little boy that had, oh my gosh, a ton of issues. Okay, like you can't even believe it. Well, one day he had terrible behavior, and all we did is I said to him, honey, you need to go get your coat and your shoes, and I'll get my coat. Let me go get my purse. And he's looking at me, where are we going? Well, we're going to Walmart. And he just started flipping out. And he said, why? I said, well, I told you the rule is if you can't do it here, or if you can't go do it at Walmart, you can't do it here. So let's go see if you can do that at Walmart. And he just started flipping his court. So I think, you know, maybe that might help you. I said, let's go see if the lady at Walmart will let you do that there. But that's the only rule we have. I know it sounds weird, but believe it or not, it works. If you can't do it at Walmart, then you can't do it here.
I have something to add to that. We have the reverse. We have my stepson come and visit us to live with Mom. And Mom had a very relaxed lifestyle set of rules, and we did not. And he would push it at our house. I mean, they always, like you say, they always push the limit. And from a young age, I mean, they're smart. Kids are smart. Mom has this set of rules. We have this set of rules. Where are you at? You were at our house. You follow our set of rules. Because he knew. I mean, they know. You know, and it's like, if you can do that at Mom's, then that's what she allows at her house. We do not allow that here. And he picked up on it. I mean, he knew. He was testing to see. And that kind of worked. Just sometimes sitting down with them logically and repeating it, you know, every time. Is that how we do it in our house? You know, and
I think the chart will help
the
for my
follow through.
instance. It is
Yeah,
that,
'cause
it's
he
not
lives
really so
there.
much
You know,
the
he
lack of
visited
rules.
us.
Well, I
He
mean,
lives
it's not
there.
really just like the lack of rules. He's got an older cousin that was being too rough with him when he was coming home with Mark. So he doesn't feel safe there, and when he comes back, if they weren't taking care of him, making sure he was fed and clothed and, you know, taking care of them when he comes back, and I'm doing that kind of stuff, it gets too much for him. But I think the chart will help, because I don't want to talk to him, because sometimes I am getting frustrated, and then my words aren't going to come out appropriately, and then it's just going to take him back to where he was, where nobody was taking care of him. So I think the chart would probably be a good idea. So I'm sorry to cut you off, I didn't get what you were going with.
Oh, no, it's fine. No, I don't mind.
But that would really help, just something to look
I really
at.
think that you try to make things that are safe, positive. We always make like things that kids, you just assume kids are always gonna wanna run through the house. Go the opposite and say, I'm gonna make this fun, assuming that these things are actually gonna make your life safe and be a positive thing for you. So, and they might even have fun if you make it into a fun, creative, I don't know if you're creative with like singing or anything type of fun. They might catch on with that, so.